But if there are trustees here today, if they'd stand so that they can be recognized. I see a smattering. There's Kyle in the back who's hiding. Christine and Bonnie. Lots of folks. Let me tell you that 4 of our colleagues, Don Boswell, Carolyn Bynum, Bonnie Gwynn, and John Milos, are rolling off at the end of this year, having concluded the end of their second terms. They'll be sorely missed. And when we come back together in August, we'll say more about each of their service to the institution. So here's the format for today. Michael and Laura Curry and I are doing sort of dog and pony shows, if you will, on Thursday afternoons at 3:30 at the Hall of Christ to talk about the strategic plan that the Board of Trustees adopted in May. You'll remember that last year, Michael and I at this meeting and again at the August meeting last year used those sessions as opportunities to solicit input from the community on issues that were relevant to the strategic planning process. And we were so very, very pleased with the input we received, and that particular input, as well as the input that we received in other fora, allowed us to generate an executive summary, or allowed our consultant to generate an executive summary of data for our strategic planning to use that was over 100 pages long. That was the summary. So this time around, we thought that what we would do would be spend approximately 35 minutes letting Michael talk to you about the strategic plan as that was adopted by the board in May, and then Michael and I will open the forum up for additional questions. We'll use the same alternating format that the CPOA used and that we traditionally use at these events. We'd welcome your thoughts and your comments, particularly on what Michael's presentation will involve. But as you know from the Chautauqua experience, anything's fair game when we're up here, and we'll do the best we can. So with that, let me introduce Michael Hill, and he's going to walk you through the strategic plan.
Thanks, Jim. And thank you to all the trustees who are here, and also those that have come this morning, stayed for the CPOA session, and then stayed along with us. I'm going to try to do a summary on the strategic plan, but I did want to share one really uplifting thing that happened this week as it relates to the strategic plan, as a way to say thank you to the group that put it together. There was a strategic planning working group that Jim appointed that had representatives from the Board of Trustees, a representative from the Foundation Board of Directors, and some members of my team. I had an opportunity to give a talk on the process of assembling that plan to Erie Insurance's corporate folks, and they live streamed it out to all of their branches across the country. They sent their executive team over yesterday to spend an hour and a half with members of my team because they're going through a similar process. And they said the process that Chautauqua went through was among the best they've ever seen, and asked us to help them design it. And for the first time in my history, a multi-million-dollar corporation asking a not-for-profit how to do it right felt pretty great. So I want to share that with you because the folks that assembled this worked really hard on it. And in particular, I want to thank our trustee and director colleagues. While my colleagues and I certainly worked hard, we get a paycheck to do that. They do not. They give of their time and spent just an enormous amount of time on that. As Jim noted, every Thursday at 3:30 in the Hall of Christ, Laura, and I are doing a deep dive on this, and we'll do that all season. That mirrors what we did last year as we were seeking your input and your thoughts. You may also recall last year we were handing out palm cards that had the web portal essence.chq.org so that you could continue to share your thoughts. We have co-opted that same portal into something called 150forward.chq.org, so there's another online portal for you to continue to share with us your thoughts and reactions on the strategic plan. And if you come to that Thursday session, you'll receive one of these, what Jim's calling a cheat sheet. The actual case for support and the metrics that are involved around each of the objectives I'll share with you this morning number around 27, 28 pages. This is not 27 or 28 pages, but what this does tell you, and what we'll share this morning, is the highlights of not only the input mechanisms that informed the plan, but the 4 overarching objectives, the 4 cross-cutting imperatives, and on the front of it is a website portal that if you want to read the entire plan, it's there. It's 150/fwd.chq.org, so that's 150forward.chq.org, and it has the entire plan, and again, there's palm cards and other things, so if you didn't get that this morning, you can also link off of just chq.org. So just a lot of different ways for you to access that information. I want to just briefly summarize the inputs on this, because this really is a document that was created after about 12 months of listening to a ton of different folks who care about Chautauqua. As you will recall, we spent all last summer asking a series of questions of community members on what was on your mind. We did a survey that went out to the primary ticket holder, so whomever purchases your gate passes in your house, that person got the email. 1,100 people responded to that survey. We did stakeholder interviews, 42 one-on-one stakeholder interviews that were conducted by an outside firm that we hired to ensure that there was confidentiality and candor in those interviews. It included multi-generational families here at Chautauqua. It included people who had come for the first time and never come back. It included families. It included people outside of our gates who call Chautauqua County their home year-round. It also included some folks who had never been here but who are peers. So we talked to the head of the Aspen Institute, we talked to the head of National Geographic. So a real broad brush stroke of input there. We did 4 different focus groups during the summer based on specific target markets that the institution wanted input from. So families with small children, folks who when they became empty nesters spent their time here, educators, you name it. There was a financial assessment done, a benchmarking scan done, a SWOT analysis done, some positioning research that went through our marketing committee that helped us understand a lot better where does Chautauqua fit in the context of other organizations. And then last summer, you'll recall, we were also running concurrently several deep studies that would feed into this plan but had reason to live on their own. So there was a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan that Cook Ross and Associates helped us lead, and we had a community kickoff here in several sessions. We were going through campus master planning, looking at the highest and best use of all 750 acres of the institution's grounds. There's a session this week on that, I believe on Tuesday at 3:30. We're doing those every other week. So if you want to see what the product was from that inquiry, please come and check that out. I overheard during the CPO meeting some conversations about security, and our new Director of Campus Safety and Security, Chertoff and Associates, the former Homeland Security Secretary, his firm came and did a security assessment of the grounds. So a ton of input, and as Jim noted, the executive summary of all that data was 100+ pages. So you can imagine what all the data underneath it included. We promised you last year that as part of this process, we would not be changing the mission statement of the institution, and we did not. We didn't change a daggone word of it, and it was fun, even leading the sessions with Jim saying we're not changing the words. We spent an entire summer listening to Chautauquans tell us what words we should change, and really appreciate the thoughts and sentiments, but we held our promise to you that we wouldn't be changing the mission of the institution. But what we did do is create not only an overarching vision for this period of planning in our time, which is a 10-year period of planning with a 5-year concentration. Ironically, if you add 5 to our current year, it takes us to the institution's 150th birthday, which is why we're calling it 150 Forward. What do we want to look like when our grand Chautauqua turns 150? And that vision was really about setting the stage so that Chautauqua could create an informed, engaged, and renewed public that fosters and actively contributes to a more civil society, nationally and within our various communities represented by our individual constituents and partners. So doubling down on what has always been our forte in our history, which is how do you bring groups of committed citizens together to understand the complex issues of the day, and then in some mechanism go forth and make the world a better place. So the vision really is not all that different from what we've been doing here or what we consistently tell you we're about. We just codified that. We noted with some humor that it was ironic that an institution whose mission is to explore the best in human values did not have written values. So we took care of that, and it was a really wonderful process that allowed us to go deep into the data and the listening of what you told us over a year that you most cared about. And I hope as I share these that they will resonate with you. So we came up with 5 written values. One is that we value multi-generational and multidisciplinary engagement through the arts, education, religion, and recreation. So Chautauqua doesn't believe that any one age bracket owns this. We do our inquiry and we come together as a community of all ages. And we also don't believe there's one portal to this inquiry or this discovery. We are founded on 4 pillars. Those 4 pillars are foundational to who we are, and we believe that the answers to the complex questions live in an examination through the 4. That we value the dignity and contributions of all people. You may have heard a theme of that in my opening 3 taps, that everyone is welcome here, every perspective is welcome here, and how we uphold that and engage with one another becomes really important. If someone believes something you don't believe, it's not appropriate to scream them down or to use words that denigrate another person, but it is absolutely okay to say, I don't understand you, or I don't agree, or let's talk about that. So all people are valued and honored here. That we value dialogue to achieve enhanced understanding, but that it must lead to positive action. So it's not just enough to be uplifted or educated or engaged. You have to go out in the world and do something with that. That we value the serenity, tradition, safety, and ecology of Chautauqua's historic grounds and surroundings. We acknowledge and recognize that this plot of earth that we share together, whether that's throughout the year or just the summer, is at the core of who we are. It's what gives us our convening power. It's our history and traditions are embedded in it. And then this is something that I think the trustees and I and my team live, that we value a balance between Chautauqua's heritage and the need to innovate. There's always that tension with how do we honor that which has happened before today and acknowledge that Chautauqua is always evolving, and that there is a right pace and rhythm to that hopefully more times than not we get right, sometimes we get wrong, but that tension is important. So shared values. All of the data leads us to 4 key objectives and 4 cross-cutting imperatives, and I want to try to go through them relatively quickly so that we can save more time for your questions and thoughts. What I would say to you about the key objectives is that ideally they fold one onto another. So as we go through these, they're not isolated bodies of work that we hope to do. They're an interdependent body of work that we hope to enact over the next 5 years. And the first one recognizes that the purest manifestation of what Chautauqua does will always be this summer assembly that we know and love. And so in the first objective, it's to optimize the summer assembly season on the Chautauqua grounds to provide a first-class experience around our pillars, around the arts, education, religion, and recreation. Whole bunch of stuff shows up in there, right? And things that you have shared with us, not only during my tenure, but beyond. How are we thinking about more and different types of accommodations? How are we tackling customer service issues around food service, transportation issues, safety issues? As we bring new buildings online or care for our old buildings, are they accessible? Are they doing what they need to be doing? And in the realm of programs, recognizing that Chautauqua's programmatic mix has changed over its history, what programs might we need to invest more in? What programs might we need to examine and ask whether their time has come and gone? So how do we think about curating this conversation? All of that shows up in the first objective, and it won't surprise you that some of the key measures around that are things that we've always measured. How do we bring more people here? So we've set, for example, one goal that by our 150th birthday, we'd like to have 150,000 person days. So someone that comes that spends the night. We've been floating around 142, 143, give or take, for a number of years. So how do we grow this place? How do we sustain what happens in the summer? How do we make it distinctive? The second one I also think speaks to our history and if done well folds into the first. So the second objective is how do we expand Chautauqua's convening authority year-round to broaden our impact beyond the summer assembly season? If you attended any of the strategic planning sessions last year, you heard us use an example, which was, as we looked at financial sustainability for the institution, I said to you last year, if you remember the first Ken Burns week, when everything was crammed, and I always love it because I can tell people that were here because they smile and go, something like this. What would it look like if every one of the 9 weeks was the first Ken Burns week? Interestingly enough, it only provides about $2.5 million more in revenue. So financial sustainability, the answer to that can't be just do this thing we've always been doing and max it out. Maxing it out doesn't get you there. So some folks have said, well, fine, just add weeks on either side of it. Well, guess what? The weeks don't come just with the revenue. They come with the expense. So no matter how much you try to bend and mold what we do in the summer, it's not enough money to make sure that we're here for our 300th birthday. So there's a business reason, but I would also argue that if you look at our history, there's a really exciting episodic thing that happens at Chautauqua. Chautauqua is really, really content to have an engagement and a conversation during the summer until the world needs Chautauqua to do something greater. And then it pokes its head up and it says, it's time for us to do something greater. So you think about the Chautauqua Literary and Scientific Circle. At the height of it, we had a lack of access to education, primarily in rural, poor areas in the middle of the country. CLSE, at its apex, 750 reading circles, mostly in the Midwest, mostly people who didn't have access to education. And this institution was sharing not only the great classics, but early 1900s, asking the country to consider what Islam meant for the world. You know, we think we're being all cutting edge when we get into interfaith work in the 80s and 90s. Early 1900s. And it was because there was a void of providing education and inspiration that we have come to know and love here every summer. Chautauqua Soviet Dialogues, a conversation that started here in the summer, but was so critical because at that time in our history, our governments weren't figuring it out. We didn't know then that the Soviet Union would collapse. This institution spends 3 years sending citizens back and forth, and I know some of you participated in that. A conversation that started here that went year-round because something needed to be done. I think, and you've heard me say often, we're in another one of those moments in the history of the country where society is starting to fracture around, people can't talk to one another. There's an inspired moment for this institution to go, oh, right, yeah, I know what this looks like. Chautauqua's being called to do more. So business imperative and mission imperative. If we do that right, there's 2 things that should come from that. One, I talked to you about the fact that if we do 9 Ken Burns weeks, that only gives us $2.5 million more. It's a conduit for us to think about getting additional revenue here at Chautauqua, philanthropic revenue or earned revenue. But the other piece that we all joke about a lot is, you know, if you know and love Chautauqua, you know and love Chautauqua. But if you don't and you tell your friends I'm going to Chautauqua, it's, oh, you're going to Chappaqua. I didn't know Hillary Clinton's neighborhood had something. Or, the Colorado Chautauqua. I know that one, and I keep thinking, with all due respect to that Chautauqua, we're just about 17 times bigger. So if we do this second objective right, and we're building brand for Chautauqua, and we're helping more people understand what happens here and why we exist, it should help us with that first goal, right, of bringing more people here. So symbiotic relationships. It's always fun to eavesdrop on your CPOA meeting, and it's always helpful to know you're thinking about some of the same things we are. And I appreciated whomever asked, what could property owners do about the lake? And I could go on a 45-minute tangent on that, but not why we're here this morning. The third objective is really about how does this institution play a vital role in making sure that that lake is healthy for the long haul. And so it's to drive the implementation of a comprehensive science-based approach to improving the health and sustainability of Chautauqua Lake and to elevate its conservation as the centerpiece of the region's economic prosperity. It is not the case that we can do nothing about what's happening in the lake. And we've been spending about a year and a half looking at other projects where when science comes together with concerned citizens and coalition building that takes into account property owners, businesses, folks for whom tourism is essential, when that nexus point of concerned folks come together, you can actually reduce and reverse some of the conditions. This institution will spend a significant amount of time and resource and energy in trying to do just that. It does not mean, excuse me, It does not mean that we will stop doing enhancements to our grounds. So we had some debate about this even as the plan was forming. We will continue to invest as much as we can in the capital of the grounds, to fix streets, to look at lighting issues. But we're going to spend a significant amount of time focusing to my right and saying, what can we do? The good news about that, which will tie into our fourth objective, is that's not just us taking resources out of our own operating budget. There's a lot of philanthropic dollars out there, and there's a lot of ways to partner with others to mobilize a response to that. But you're going to hear a lot about it. I mean, you probably felt like you heard a lot about it last year as we were going through lawsuit issues and we were trying to give you updates. The lake is not a topic that is going to come off our agenda, and look forward to having you all help with that. And then finally, the last objective really is around making sure Chautauqua is sustainable. And the fourth objective is, how do we grow and diversify revenue to address critical needs, to increase our financial resiliency, and to fund Chautauqua's future? With that same group from Erie, I was joking the other day because one of them said, so what happens if you have a bad business quarter at Chautauqua? I said, I have a business quarter at Chautauqua. And Jamie's always been helpful on this, but think about this. The product that we produce, not to use business terms, but in this sense it makes sense, happens over 3 months. We spend almost all of our expense budget in 3 months, minus staff and maintenance of the grounds, and almost all of our revenue shows up in the 3 months, including the majority of our philanthropy, because our development staff is engaging you while you're here mostly. Get another pocket somewhere around December. If we have a bad summer, there's no making it up in the next 3 quarters. That's not a blueprint for sustainability. That keeps me up late at night as I think about significant risk. So what might we add to that portfolio so that on the odd chance we have a bad summer or several bad summers, we're not in jeopardy of reducing what we do in the summer, or worse, putting ourselves in risk of being at peril at the institution? So we're looking at 2 different things. You've already probably heard and read about the fact that we're doubling down on philanthropy. We have 2 primary revenue sources that I'm grossly summarizing. One is gate fees and related fees, and the other one is philanthropic contributions. And those philanthropic contributions primarily come from people who come here and love the place and want to make sure it's okay. We have not spent much, if any, time making a case for support about what would it look like to give to the institution if you don't own a home here or you don't spend a week here. And yet we do work that is relevant and matters in the world. We've talked about some other initiatives here where there are dollars to be spent or to be raised. So we've added significantly to our development staff. We opened up a DC office to make sure that they had access to funders, could be closer to airplanes, that they were out in the world. So that's one half of it. But if you come to the master planning presentation, one of the other things that no business owner would do is let the resources that they have sit fallow for 9 months. We have 100+ public buildings that primarily produce work for 3 months. Their maintenance is year-round. What we spend on them is year-round. We have land across the street that we could think somewhat differently about. If there's golfers in the room, don't worry, I'm not talking about obliterating the golf course, but how do we think about an earned revenue stream that provides more consistent revenue across, not so that we don't do things here in the summer, but so that when we want to do things better and we want to make sure that the summer is always here, we've got a much more varied portfolio of resources coming in. So for the finance and marketing folks on my board, they love this. For the folks that love to talk about program and mission, this is where people usually gloss over, but it's critical. It's really critical if we're going to have a 300th birthday. So those are the 4 objectives. Very quickly, the 4 cross-cutting imperatives are things that we know we need to address now. Some of them undergird those 4 objectives, but some of them are just things we need to do. So I talked about expanding Chautauqua's convening authority beyond the summer assembly season, and I keep picking on Jim Pardo, and one of these days I keep asking him to tell me that I'm wrong, and he really is hiding a $5 million R&D fund somewhere. He assures me he's not. So as we think about how do you do program outside of the summer assembly season, we have 2 options, right? We could make a series of choices to take something away from the summer to invest over here. Would like to do as little of that as possible. No plans to do anything specific yet. But what most not-for-profits are doing as they think about expanding their presence is acknowledging that if they can take what they're good at and stack it up with what someone else is good at, you can have a greater impact without raising your expense costs. So what would it look like in strategic partnerships is the cross-cutting imperative. What would it look like if in a brand-building partnership we team up with PBS or NPR or some other commercial entity who they know how to take things out in a new media environment? That's not been our forte. We know how to convene content and people. What does it look like if that's how we get our name out there? You're going to see just a snippet of this during our Grace Week. Krista Tippett, who's moderating all of the lectures at 10:45, they're all being recorded, and they're going to be now sent out to all the places that air on Being. And so Chautauqua's name and all of your laughter and hopefully applause will be informing people about what Chautauqua looks like. It's taking us beyond the summer assembly season. It's elevating the name of Chautauqua, and it's costing us nothing more than what it cost us to put on a normal week. So how do we think about that? Mobilization of technology. If you've ever tried to buy a ticket here online the day the tickets go on sale, I'm sorry. I'm deeply, deeply sorry, and I will tell you that it is among the worst days for my staff. And the reason for that is while we've kept up with things like desktop computers, what we've not kept up with or thought through as carefully as we need to is an integrated use of technology to do everything from sell tickets to make the grounds more accessible to disseminate what we do here. You saw a little bit of an investment in it, so an example of just what this might mean for us. We now have the capacity to have all of the lectures closed captioned. A simple use of technology that is opening up what we do at 10:45 for a group of people who have never been able to access it. So if you have no hearing, 10:45 was off limits to you. Now in real time, you can participate in the lectures. Or if you just are hard of hearing, or you're just one of those learners who it sinks in double if you hear it and read it. What else might we do with technology? How else might we understand what's happening here in real time that allows my team and the Board of Trustees to more effectively manage this institution? I will tell you, that's not a small investment. That's a 7-figure investment, and it's something that we need to really think about in the next couple of years. Labor and talent solutions. So I'll wade into the waters of an earlier issue I heard. Yes, we didn't have enough bus drivers when we started the season, and it wasn't because we were cheap. It's because most of them were still driving bus for schools in the area, and we couldn't find them no matter how much we paid them. It is a sign and symbol of two things that we are wrestling with that we are being called to think differently about. One is we go from about 125 full-time staff to more than 2,000 staff overnight. It's the biggest whiplash culturally for us every year. Those seasonal staff members are pulled primarily from two different places. One, if your children or grandchildren come and are of a certain age, many of them do seasonal jobs, and we're grateful for it. That's actually a smaller pool than what we get from Chautauqua County. Chautauqua County's population is currently not growing. We hope to help reverse that. And therefore, the competition for seasonal jobs is fierce. And it is the case with mandatory raises in New York State minimum wage that for many of our jobs, you can make more money working at McDonald's. And we've heard young people say, why would I argue with trying to get through a gate? I have gate passes, I have transportation issues, when I can go down the street, make more money with less hassle, right? So competition for seasonal labor is a really significant problem for us just to do what we do now. None of the other stuff that I was talking about. The other thing that's finally coming home to roost for us is different trends in how people work. So we have always said that if you want to work full-time for Chautauqua, you must move to Chautauqua County and work here. The number of, in particular at the director level, we just looked for a director of youth and family programs and fortunately found someone that does want to move here, and we're thrilled about that. That was after 4 failed searches. And the first 3 said, happy to be there all summer, but would like to stay in my own community and telework. We've just never considered those types of things. I'm not flagging that we will deeply go in that direction, but what I would say to you is we can no longer simply be rigid about the way that we engage employees. That world has come and gone, and not being flexible about that is not going to bring the best talent to work on behalf of Chautauqua. And the last one, and then I will just briefly talk to you about how we're looking at implementation monitoring and evaluation. The last cross-cutting imperative is around diversity. It is a topic that's not going away. I had a Chautauquan say to me last year, if I said the word diversity one more time, they were going to punch me. And I said, well, then punch me. Because, and I want to be really, really clear about this, and I need your help on this. We're not focusing on diversity because I feel like being PC. That is not what this is about. We have a business imperative and a mission imperative to focus on diversity. The mission imperative is we say we curate the great conversations of the day. And when I use the word conversations, I mean across all four pillars, because I think you can have one of the most powerful conversations by watching an opera that I can put on 1045. And I think we demonstrated that with As-One last year. Right now, if we're being fair and honest, outside of who we bring as far as talent, which is relatively diverse, we curate the great conversations of the day for middle class and upper middle class white people. And that's just honest. You've all said that to me, walk around the grounds. We're not deeply living into our mission, and I would argue we're not having fulsome conversations until we find a way that anyone that wants to be here has a way to be here. And so we're going to focus on that. The other one is actually a message that's coming to me from your children and grandchildren, many of whom have spent their entire childhood growing up here. And the word that we're most often hearing when they come back is, it's creepy that it's this homogenous. Now, you may not find it creepy, but the reality is at some point your kids and grandkids are going to be the ones that we're going to need to live in these houses. And if they find it creepy and they don't want to come back, we've got a business disaster on our hands in another 10 or 15 years. So mission imperative and business imperative, I think we should do it even if there wasn't a business imperative. But the one thing I hope you'll share with me is this is just not a new president trying to be PC. It's absolutely critical that we address this. In the longer document that you can find online, you will see a series of metrics under each objective, and they start with the phrase, by 2024 we will. And there's bullet points under each of them that tell you what success looks like. The other part of this is that, and Jim may have referred to this, Jim is term limited out. There's a new board chair coming in, which we shared with you, Candy Maxwell. I think you'll enjoy Candy. I also love that Candy broke the glass ceiling of board chairs. It's our first female board chair in our history. And I always promise Candy I'll say this because she says, I want to be qualified to be board chair because I'm qualified to be board chair and not a woman. She is beyond qualified, if she were an alien, to be board chair. But she has assembled an implementation group of trustees that's working with Shannon Rosner, who's my chief of staff and our new VP of strategic initiatives, to understand how what I've just shared with you shows up in annual operating plans and long-range evaluative instruments that allow the Board of Trustees to know if we're on track, that allows my team to know if we're on track, and gives me something to report out to you, not only online, because this website that I shared and that is on the front of this document is not a static portal. It's meant to be something that we consistently update. But one of the things that was called for in the evaluation piece was that every year in some forum or another, I would stand up and share with you where I thought we were, what we've learned, things that are going maybe better than we thought, things that are just way off the rails and we're thinking differently about. Because this too is not a static document. It's a living document that as the world changes needs to change with it. But we're committed to those four objectives. We think they're the right body of work for the next 5 years. And we know, and hopefully you will see sooner rather than later, some significant progress on the imperatives. So thanks for listening to me just all of this stuff, and I know Jim and I are happy to answer any questions you have on this or anything else that's on your mind in our time remaining.
So just briefly before we take questions, just one quick observation. This is really good work. I wish each of you could have been sitting where I was sitting, watching the expressions on your faces when Mike was making his presentation. You were nodding vertically, not horizontally. There was a twinkle in your eye. There was a grin on your face when something that he said sort of struck that inner part of you. I was at a session yesterday where I described this strategic plan as the result of serious people doing serious work seriously. And we could not have done that had we not had Laura Curry. Laura chaired the Strategic Planning Committee. Most of you know Laura. She's a multi-generation Chautauqua. She grew up in the county, grew up on the grounds year-round, and continues to come here with her children and her dogs. So when you see Laura around the grounds, thank her. She drove a process that was first class and has produced a vision for this institution that will take us to our 150th anniversary and beyond. And I could not have been more pleased to have been part of it, and I am very proud of the work product that this group came up with. So that said, we'll take questions. Again, we'll alternate from side to side. You know the drill. Name where you stay in the season, and you remember my not so polite admonition that comments are short and questions begin with who, what, where, why, when, all those words that we learned in 7th grade. So we'll start over here.
Bob Hopper, 38 Vincent. My wife Carol and I started coming in 2002, and it was a pretty mysterious place then, and it took a while for us to be accepted, even as middle-class white people, to be accepted as people who someone would listen to. After 16 years, we now feel like we are Chautauquans. But for marketing and getting people to come, this place is like a mystery cult. And how it works is a mystery. I'm the president of something started out as the Chautauqua Science Group. We found that we could not put our schedule in the daily paper because we were not an independent Chautauqua group. I went to try to find out, how do you become an independent Chautauqua group? There are no, look, and this is what, there are no rules on how to do that. So we allied with the CLSC alumni group so that we could be in the paper. But it makes our work a little bit less effective. We want to help clean the lake. We think together with BT&G, we can be your partners. But the mysteries make that hard to do. So please help us there. On the strategic plan, new friends are silver and old friends are gold, as the cliche goes. We old people don't do PDF documents online. We read paper. Please put 5 copies of the whole plan in the library printed so we can read them. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Hi, John Luker, 9 Cookman. Week 1 next year, climate change. What's the institution doing to lower their carbon footprint? Do you have a sustainability manager here? Do you have a plan to be 100% clean energy by any date? Have you ever gone up to the dumpsters at the parking lot by the golf course once or twice before and during the season and seen all the waste that's being thrown away? I mean, I know we've got rain gardens going on, but what else are you doing?
I think, is John Ched still here? Or did he sneak out? Hi, John. John, you want to join me for a second? Because you're going to have a ton more info to answer that question appropriately than me saying, why don't you go see John Ched? He thought he was hiding.
So I was kidding with John and with Sebi as they were sitting back during the CPOA meeting with their sunglasses on, thinking that was actually going to hide them from the group.
So we're talking about the recycling and sustainability for moving forward. So, well, we have several, for example, on sustainability and efficiency and reduction of use of fuels, carbon fuels, that sort of thing. We have several studies that we did probably about 5 or 6 years ago on different building projects that would help us with efficiency. Like, we've already replaced the boilers, for example, at Turner Community Center, and that saved a substantial amount of fuel consumption. We have other projects just like that, but if you look around, not a lot of our buildings are year-round, so we don't have heating systems in a lot of our buildings. So we already have kind of a minor carbon footprint other than electricity. And with electricity, we've gone around to most of our year-round facilities for sure, and replaced lighting with LED lighting to reduce, any energy consumption. We also have some solar power that we use right now, and we're currently looking into buying into or constructing a solar farm. We're going to try to stay away from solar on rooftops because that damages the building and potentially creates all kinds of maintenance nightmares. But we would be interested in the possibility of a solar farm, or at least buying into a solar farm through a cooperative agreement. So those things are, from that side we're doing. As far as the recycling goes, there are not a lot of people who are accepting recycling anymore right now. So we're having difficulties with that as it comes and goes, but yeah, there is quite a bit of refuse that occurs up at the upper lot, which it really shouldn't happen because we have people who aren't from Chautauqua who are dropping things off up there. We try to manage that as much as we can, but we get a ton of stuff up there that doesn't belong to Chautauqua Institution at all.
The great thing would be if one of our renters was complaining that a ride to Buffalo cost $125 or something like that. If you could have an app like Mambo, a ride share thing, or even consider an institution shuttle bus to, we all know we're at the end of nowhere here, sort of, and the carbon footprint of transportation is pretty big getting here, and as well as people's ability just to come and enjoy the place. It's hard for a lot of people. So if you looked into the economics of a shuttle or an app at the least.
You want to address that? I know that it's been discussed.
Yeah, so we're looking at a number of different things on that. Not only how do we get shuttles back and forth between the airport, as you might imagine, that becomes a volume issue. Right now we're running just cars in our own fleet up there. One of the things that we know we need to do as we go into master planning is layer on a transportation plan at a macro sense, not only just how do you get around here, but how does this institution engage with things like getting up to Buffalo Airport or down into Jamestown for people that want to do that. And we've been heavily involved in bringing back the Jamestown Airport with more reliable commercial service. So we're looking at a whole bunch of things around that.
I'm Mary Koch, 31 Ames, a longtime Chautauquan. Wondered about the partnerships. I think the partnerships idea is fabulous, and wondered if you could have a partnership with a culinary school so that perhaps there could even be, with year-round planning, culinary school here that would run year-round and then provide more food options for people during the summer.
Yeah, thank you for that. For some of you may have met Leland Lewis, who is our new general manager of the Athenaeum Hotel. If I think I have energy, I think Leland, it runs in his sleep. He's remarkable, and he's started to take our team to culinary fairs and culinary school gatherings. It won't surprise you that the biggest impediment for us having a partnership like that is housing. It used to be the case that the Athenaeum Hotel had places where its summer staff could stay. Those things eventually got sold off or redeveloped. Interestingly enough, one of the partnerships we're looking at, and I think will be up and running for next year, is Jamestown Community College has wonderful dorms, which even during their session are not fully subscribed. There is a new president at JCC, Daniel DeMarc, who I've had a number of conversations with, and it's very likely we'll be taking one of those dorms next summer. We'll have to figure out the shuttle traffic back and forth, but that opens up a possibility for culinary internships, for us to think about the use of international students in some of these seasonal jobs, a whole bunch of other things, and helps another local partner. So we think there's a win-win there, and one of the main topics that came up is culinary partnerships. So thanks for raising it.
Jim Finley at 6 South. I'm going to ask the same question I asked at the CPOA meeting. I asked them what the update was in terms of internet providers here at Chautauqua. Currently, Spectrum is the big player, and Windstream, I think, is the only other possibility. The question is whether the institution is trying to increase the number of internet providers for competitive reasons. And there was discussion several years ago about perhaps getting homeowners on the same bargaining with the institution to try and reduce the price of the internet. And the corollary to that question is there's Wi-Fi available in small areas throughout the institute. I guess the question I would ask, is there a plan to actually get Wi-Fi for the entire institution?
Yeah, thanks. So the second one is a little bit easier to answer because it involves some of the campus master planning we're doing and thinking through that. And I would say to you, although it's probably not the answer you want, Paul Perry's answer was dead on. I have nothing more to add than what Paul said. Our IT director actively works with it. It frustrates us as well. The local providers do not perceive us to have the heft I think your question implies, and totally understand why it's frustrating. Wish I had a different magic wand to wave around it, but there's just very few providers and not a ton different that we've been able to figure out to do, but it's not for lack of effort. I mean, it's pretty consistently on Cindy Mando's desk, who is our director of IT.
So the internet providers that are not worried about losing your business if you basically shop around?
No, because I mean, think about it. The rest of the year, we're not a big business. I mean, when you all go away, most of our campus shuts down. We're a few buildings where our staff works. We're not running programs out of the amphitheater. We're not a big customer off season.
Okay.
You know, so that's where there's lack of leverage, really.
Hi, my name's Teresa Cameraman, 22 Ramble. I realize that diversity is an important issue, and I've been going to the African American Heritage House porch chats and some of their events, and they've put on some great speakers. I've also gone to the IDEA session too, and sometimes I hear a little different comments in both groups and wondered how much that you're incorporating the African American Heritage House into the IDEA. I'll just give you an example, is that at the IDEA group, I heard someone make a comment that the biggest barrier to diversity is the gate pass cost. Then you go to the African American Heritage House, they say, no, it's not exactly the cost, but it's making it a place where African Americans want to spend their leisure dollars, which is a difference. Mm-hmm. I heard a comment at that group about, you know, Stacey Abrams is going to be coming here. It's a big event, it'll probably be very big and popular, and people want to hear her. Why is it being held here versus the amphitheater? But that's how it always is. And so I can see if they're not in this IDEA group that there could be misunderstandings. So that's what I want to know.
Yeah, so thank you for that. A couple things to unpack there. We're in very regular contact with the AH group, and we've been proud to subsidize a whole lot of resources that make the incredible programming they do possible. The house itself is leased through philanthropy to the institution to house our diversity fellows, and we've been really proud that they can program and that it has that moniker. Shannon in particular, who's leading as our point person on diversity, has worked with Errol, their president, on everything from trying to help with passes and venues. So there's a lot more we could do, but there's a lot we are doing that I don't think we're talking about. And she has regular conversations. So I'm proud that we're partnering with them. One of the things, and this came up at a session sometime this week, so let me take one giant step back. When we talk about diversity, we're not just talking about bringing more African Americans to the grounds. It's a much broader approach to that, and that's why I'm glad you've gone to the IDEA work, because Shannon and her consultant are starting to frame this. One of the things an African American member said, which I totally agree with, there's nothing more insulting than saying if we want diversity, we need to bring down gate passes and provide subsidized housing as if only white people have resources. If we want to talk about socioeconomic diversity, that's totally valid, but that's not race specific. And so I hope we can break that. You know, the easy solution is provide subsidized housing and gate passes, as if diverse folks don't have resources, because they do. And our current business model really needs those folks to come with us. So I think there's lot more synergies we can have with AAH. I think diversity is not an easy nut to crack. I think we all have different perspectives, which is one of the reasons that we start the IDEA work by asking, what's your interpretations, what's your perspective? I would say something for the community that's really interesting as well, and this came out of the Cook-Ross report. The number of folks that will stop me and say, so what's the administration's plan for diversity? And what I keep saying to them is, if the community can't answer the question for itself what it can do, it'll never happen. This problem is more yours than it is the administration's. We can provide all the framework and support. What's been really fascinating to me at so many of our sessions is the only question where we don't get a lot of answers is, what could you personally do to help? That's when those sessions tend to go silent. And I don't say that as a critique, I say that as a challenge. I think we need to all think about, what can we individually do? The administration is going to double down and play its part, but do you have people that represent various diverse populations you can invite? Can you think of different pockets of places where we can send information and attention that might bring more folks here? So that one's going to be a generational thing for us to work on. I appreciate you bringing up the differences between the tubes. I think we need to be more lockstep. All of us who care about this topic need to be more lockstep. AAHH is really growing in heft and presence, and as they mature into their own organization and we think better of how we can partner, I think you'll see a lot more synergies. There's work to do.
David Clark, 6th Crescent. This is in the category of small ways the institution can lead by example. We heard a wonderful talk yesterday about the plastics in the ocean. However, every time I walk into the bookstore, no matter what I buy, even a newspaper, I am offered a massive plastic white bag to take with me. I don't understand that. I also don't understand selling single-use plastic water bottles at the AMP by the hundreds at a time when we realize how dangerous they are.
Yeah. So we have, and I'm kind of excited that where this is coming from, we have a group of young people working on a quasi-environmental audit for us right now on places where we still need to improve, whether that's straws or bags or plastic. So it's definitely something that is on the radar for us to think about. What are easy ways for us to swap things out? Yeah, so couldn't agree more, and it's on the list. Absolutely.
Hi, I'm Paul Luxinger. My wife and I have been coming to Chautauqua for almost 50 years. We've been property owners for almost 40 years. And Michael, I'd just like to compliment you on your efforts to bring all the factions around Chautauqua Lake together as one group to try to solve the problems of the lake. Because if we don't have the lake, then we really don't have much of anything. Yeah. That's core. So I really respect your efforts there. That's very, very important.
Thank you.
The other thing, coming to Chautauqua all these years, I've tried to explain to friends far away, what Chautauqua is all about. And we go through a lot of discussions and everything, but maybe you can explain. And I've said, well, in the end, it's a summer camp for grown-ups. Yeah. It's a place where you go and you're free to do anything you want. You bring your kids, your grandkids, they can do anything they want, no controls at all. Mm-hmm. So I'd like you to, can you tell me in, say, 10 or 12 words how you describe Chautauqua?
Chair of our marketing committee is right in front. Let him tackle that one. Here's one of the key challenges, and we're entering into a phase of a rebranding process right now. The problem is Chautauqua's not one thing, right? And so I could answer that question for you depending on why I come. What I would say to you, and these are not the most elegant marketing words, but what I say to folks is Chautauqua is an organization and a community that comes together to address what's happening in society, to think about creative solutions, and it does it through all the generations and through 4 different portals. And it's the exploration that is what people come for. Lots more marketing words need to go around that, but new president's not going to solve that, which you all haven't figured out in 140 years.
All right, I promise that we're going to end this one at 11, so the people who are standing are the last three people to ask questions, and we start over there. All right, last four. Go ahead, Joan.
Joan Smith, year-round on Bryant Avenue. One of our neglected groups are the Native Americans. You are on Seneca land of the Iroquois Nation. There's a Native American Indian National Museum in Washington, and now we have a connection to Washington. Could they not be one of our major groups here?
Yeah, we've been having lots of conversations about how to acknowledge and honor what land we're on. And there, groups like ours are all trying to figure out the right way to acknowledge that past and to also celebrate the heritage of indigenous peoples that have been here. So definitely we can look at partnering with the museum. We're doing a lot of work now through our visual arts program. Sharon Loudon, who's our new artistic director, has started a relationship with our local Seneca Museum, and they're bringing parts of their staff over to work with our students and vice versa. There's more that can be done. I was really touched when I was installed that the then president of the Seneca Nation brought me a Seneca Nation flag as an inauguration gift, which now hangs in the amp. And that has started a conversation that continues to figure out what are the right ways for us to partner and celebrate and elevate one another.
Thank you.
I'm Barbara Georgescu, 33 Ramble, and I usually stand here to complain, but this morning I want to compliment the aesthetics. This year, the extension of Odlin Plaza in front of Hulquist, the removal of the bleeding paint that was on Miller, all the way down to the bookstore. I don't think this place is creepy at all. I think it is really quite beautiful, and the hotel in every way, the food. Congratulations on a year well done.
Thank you.
I'll be really fast. I know you want to make the gates open instead of closed, so it's a very small comment. For people who work here who don't work for the institution, for example, people in the spa or in the hair salon or whatever, is there a way to allow them or offer them the ability to engage in the programming? I heard a story, somebody was getting their nails done, the person doing it had been a ballet person, and the patron said, I hope you come to the ballet tonight. She said, I can't, I don't have a gate pass. And that breaks my heart. She's doing our nails and our hair. Can we offer that as a non-institution employee? And the second piece is the guest of pass, which a lot of us have. Is there a way that guest of pass could be 63 nights? So if you have 5 people, you could just use it.
Yes, I'm going to answer both kind of at a macro level with two things. One is there's a pricing working group that members of the board are working on with Emily Morris, for whom all gate passes kind of get organized underneath, to look at all sorts of different situations. So you mentioned 2. But there's a million others, kids that are under 13 who parents say don't go to programs, or weekend guests, or the one that you also mentioned, which is a popular one around how do we think of the guest of pass chopped up. Interestingly enough, there are 2 issues we've got to tackle, break, and rebuild to make any of that possible. One is, over time, trying to accommodate a ton of niche needs. We have something like 100 or 120 different versions of gate passes and things that have made it so complex in a organically built ticketing system that we're not even able to navigate and manage as well as we would like that which we have, which is why you see crashes happen when we sell tickets. The board asked the staff, and the staff has spent about a year now looking at a off-the-shelf potential product for ticketing that will allow us to be much more nimble in some of these things, that could allow us to get to some of what you're talking about, in particular with the guest of pass. Right now, we don't have the staffing or technology capacity to break it up that way. This is going to allow us to do that, but we're starting with looking comprehensively at all these issues, because we got ourselves into trouble by trying to, after hearing something like what you just shared, okay, let me go fix that one issue. Well, what you don't realize is that 20 people are fixing one issue, and before you know it, now the panoply of things that you can print or move is so complex that it paralyzes the system. So not ducking your question, just saying we're starting at a really high level of saying we've got to wipe out and rebuild what it looks like to issue passes in service to a whole host of needs, and then have a technology system that actually allows the people up at the main gate to execute those types of things.
Come grab me up. Okay. Last question.
Hi, Mary Henderson, 25 Longfellow. I heard a rumor, Chautauqua, who knew rumors of Chautauqua, that solar panels are not permitted on the roofs of private residences. And given that we all want to reduce the carbon imprint, in addition to New York State giving tax breaks for New York State residents, is that policy true? And if it is, why? And if not, could we have some more publicity about it?
You've got the ARB regs.
I love it when the last question goes to John Shedd and I didn't let him leave.
He's torture. Yes, so there is a regulation, but it doesn't say you can't have solar panels. They can't be visible from a street or walkway. It is kind of nutty, but we are looking at the potential to change some of these things coming up now. We're currently reviewing the current regulations with the ARB right now.
As we try to get millennials to come here, I think having a proactive position on things like solar is going to engage our potential younger visitors, because rather than hear you say, oh, we can't have solar panels because it might not look nice, it kind of, I think, engages the more youthful audience to see us as not a bunch of old ladies who don't want the roof line screwed up. Just, we are marketing to those younger people, I would hope. Thank you.
You don't look old to me. So I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it's something we've struggled with since the day I've been here, because some people, they'll put up a solar panel and at some part of the season it's not visible at all, but then when the leaves fall off you can see it. So it's something we're definitely looking at. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you back in week 7. Take care.